So Dragon's Teeth has been out for a week now, giving us all enough time to really sink our teeth into this DLC. Now I've had opportunity in that time to play all of the different maps, various game modes, different player counts, and really experience what this DLC is like. So today I wanted to ask you guys, was this DLC really worth the wait? Without a doubt, Dragon's Teeth has definitely been the most anticipated DLC for Battlefield 4 so far. With China Rising and Naval Strike offering very large maps with lots of vehicles and aircraft combat, Dragon's Teeth is very much the first infantry-focused DLC we've seen in Battlefield 4. Now of course we have had Second Assault, but we can't really count that DLC as it is just the return of maps we saw in Battlefield 3. Now I myself, as an infantry-focused player, I had been looking forward to Dragon's Teeth. Of course China Rising and Naval Strike, very good DLCs, I enjoyed the maps, I especially enjoyed the weapons they brought to the game, but for an infantry-style player, they don't always offer the best gameplay, so Dragon's Teeth has been something I've wanted to see for a very long time. Now the DLC itself was being compared by a lot of people in the community, myself included, to the Aftermath DLC we saw with Battlefield 3. Of course that too was an infantry-focused urban environment set DLC, and it was also the second to last DLC in the premium cycle of Battlefield 3, so a lot of comparisons to be drawn between Aftermath and Dragon's Teeth. Now the Aftermath DLC was arguably the most successful and most popular DLC for Battlefield 3. It brought great maps to the game that added a great addition to the already pretty good list of maps we had for Battlefield 3. It brought a great game mode, Scavenger, which I've spoke to you guys about before. I think that game mode added a whole new lease of life to the game, so when it was released at that time, towards the end of the life cycle of Battlefield 3, it did bring a whole new interest back into the game. And arguably it did bring the first insight into the levolution aspect we would see in Battlefield 4. The maps themselves were well designed, they are still very popular even now. You will always find very populated servers on any of the Aftermath maps, so without a doubt, those maps and the entire DLC was very successful. So can Dragon's Teeth live up to that comparison? Well, starting off with the playstyle, there is no doubt it is a very infantry-focused DLC. It is the way it's meant to be, and it does seem very successful. There are no new vehicles with this DLC, and each map on any game mode seems to have very few vehicles, hardly any armoured vehicles. I don't think there's a single tank on this DLC at all, so it does work very well for infantry. It is my style of DLC, and the maps themselves, for the most part, do work successfully. Now, this is where things maybe start to break down a little bit. Of course, a lot of you guys have left me feedback in the comments of my recent Dragon's Teeth videos. I've asked you guys to tell me all your thoughts on this DLC, so I could really get a great overall idea of what people think about these maps. Now, I have to say, it does seem very 50-50. A lot of people out there love these maps, some people really don't enjoy them, especially Propaganda, also the likes of Sunken Dragon, which I do think is a good map. Now, a lot of people do have some issues with Pearl Market. Now, this is something I spoke to you guys about in my Pearl Market video. It is a very intense map, especially if you don't know your way around yet. You can find yourself being killed from behind, from above, from all different angles, and it can be a very stressful map to play on. Now, I found the same situation with Flood Zone when the game was first released, and now that's probably my most favourite map in the game. So at the moment, I am reserving my judgment on these maps, especially Pearl Market. At the moment, it may not be the best map in the game, but you never know, later on I really could enjoy this map. Now, graphically, I think we can all agree this is probably one of the best looking DLCs we've seen so far. The level of detail on the textures, the lighting, and also things like the Levolution on Lumphini Gardens, Sunken Dragon is very impressive. Also, that level of destruction we see in certain maps like Propaganda is very nostalgic and reminiscent of Bad Company 2. A lot of players have been pleased to see that ability back in the game to practically flatten every single building in a map. Now, whilst we're also discussing the positives, I am a massive fan of the weapon additions in this DLC. I love the MPX, I think the Bulldog is a great alternative to weapons like the Scar H. So there are some good new weapons, they're not just filling gaps, but they do actually have a real practical role in the game. So it is great to see those new weapons available. And of course, while a lot of people were a little bit worried at first, the new pickup-only weapons like the Roar are pretty cool to see. But for me, that's where the positives really start to die out. Now, the game mode itself, Chain Link, I spoke to you guys about this previously. I do think it is a pretty good game mode. It could be more successful if it was adopted onto other maps apart from this DLC, but I don't think it has enough difference to it to make it stand out from other game modes we already have available in the game. Making a comparison back to Aftermath, if you think about Scavenger mode, it was something we'd never seen in Battlefield 3 before. It was a very distinguished and separate game mode. Now Chain Link does just feel like a slight alternative to Conquest, so for me there isn't quite enough difference in that game mode to make it really stand out. And I think the same can be said for the maps, again making a very direct comparison to Aftermath. If you looked at those maps for even maybe 1 or 2 seconds, you would know straight away and distinguish those as Aftermath maps. That very urban, desert-y, sandy environment was something we hadn't seen in Battlefield 3 before. Now with Dragon's Teeth, whilst these maps do look new, they aren't that different, that's strikingly different from things we already have. Sunken Dragon looks very much like Dawnbreaker, Pearl Market looks very much like Flood Zone, and the list goes on. So maybe apart from Lumphini Gardens, which you could argue does look like the first area of Operation Metro in the park, there isn't much difference in the look of these maps from what we already have in Battlefield 4. Now of course all of this is just my own opinion, but I don't quite think overall the Dragon's Teeth DLC does live up to the Aftermath DLC. Now of course Battlefield 4 is meant to be an improvement, the next stage of development from Battlefield 3, and that incorporates all of the DLCs that go along with it. So seeing something like Dragon's Teeth that doesn't quite live up to the comparison made with Aftermath, and they are very comparable DLCs in terms of the style of gameplay we're meant to receive with these games, it just isn't quite up to scratch of the level we've seen in the past. Now of course, as I said, these just are my own thoughts and opinions. There may be some of you guys out there who don't own Premium and you are considering buying Dragon's Teeth. I will say it is no shadow of a doubt the best DLC we have seen for Battlefield 4 so far, but it just isn't quite the hype we've been expecting compared to the Aftermath DLC for Battlefield 3. But down in the comment section below, I want to hear from you guys. I want to get a discussion going with you. What are your serious, honest opinions on the Dragon's Teeth DLC? Do you think it is comparable to Aftermath? I think there is a lot there to compare it to, but it just isn't up to scratch. So tell me all down in the comment section below. And of course, if you did enjoy this video, a like is massively appreciated. It does really help me out. But in the meantime, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.